Good morning. How are you? I'm Nancy from Black Sheep Knitting here in my yarn shop in Needham, Massachusetts. Welcome, and if you are a regular listener, thanks for coming back, and if you're new to us, I hope you enjoy it. Today on our podcast, I wanted to talk about knitting funks and blues and whatever you call it. When you get to a point where everything you're knitting on, or the one project you're knitting on, isn't doing it for you. Well, I went through that this week. Robin said she was going through it, and so was Viola. So there was something in the air, I guess. But I had just reached a point in two projects that, and I always have many projects on the needles, as many of you know. I either didn't want to go further on them. I had one project it had some lace in it, and I kept making stupid mistakes, which I want to do from time to time. And I kept having to rip back, and I just thought, these are not giving me pleasure, and I think knitting should give you pleasure. We all knit for different reasons. I think I'm more of a project knitter. Some people are process knitters. Maybe I'm a little both, because I love it when I get something on the needles that just seems to fly and seems, I just loving doing it. So I did a couple of things. One thing I did was I started watching some YouTube videos, knitting YouTube videos, and I happened upon Irene Ashar, who you've seen me interview here on a podcast, who is an amazing podcaster, and she has a podcast called Fiber Chats. And she interviews all kinds of, mostly knitters and crocheters, but other artists all around the world. And I find her an amazing interviewer. So she makes the interview, these podcasts, go so beautifully because of the incredibly thoughtful, intelligent questions that she asks the people that she's interviewing. So the first one I watched was a guy named Willie Smith, and you should look him up. There are a million Willie Smiths up there, but I think there's only one knitter. And he's a young guy who is a teacher. He discovered knitting apparently in college. He's a math teacher, and boy, do I wish I'd had him as a math teacher. So just listening to him, how he views the world, he's created a business around knitting. He has a family. His wife apparently does a lot of creative things and is very good at helping him with this business. And he's now on the rat. I say that because I'm always trying to get more followers on my Instagram. He has 140,000 followers. So this guy is just doing amazing things, and his attitude about life and business and teaching, and how he loves to teach. So he's teaching a lot of knitting. He's a beautiful knitter, and I think for a while he was making hats and selling them. And he just has the business down to a science, and he's thoughtful about it, and he has worked hard to make this business work for him. And I imagine he works equally as hard as teaching his math students. And he talks about knowing things like pop culture and things that, explaining things in a way that kids can understand, or his students, whoever he's teaching, that they can relate to. So not just teaching your standard way of teaching. It's like if you're talking about a length, you might talk about, it's as far as that football field, or it's as big as a cup of coffee, or whatever, but using examples that people can relate to. So I watched him, and he was fascinating. He was just so inspiring, and his attitude about knitting and how much he loved it, and he would just knit forever. And he said he has people who ask him if he's gay. No, I'm not gay, because I'm a guy that likes to knit. No, I love to knit. So anyway, I watched him. Then she interviewed another person, and in between she interviewed a lot of people who were doing a Rami Hill knit along. Rami Hill is a lace shawl knitter. And so I watched a bunch of those. Those got me inspired. And then I watched another young woman named Taylor Bento, who is a crocheter. She does some knitting, but she mostly crochets. And she also had this amazing way of describing how she went from marketing into a crocheting business and how she did it. And her patterns are very cool, I have to say. So I did that. I watched those, and that got me sort of energized and excited again. And then I always have a stack of patterns sitting by me, and of course I have an amazing stash. And I thought about what had I bought in the last 6 months that I hadn't started. And I came upon first this pattern, which I've wanted to do for a long time, and it's called the Paul Klee sweater. And I think most of you know he was an amazing artist. I don't know that he's still alive, and I can't remember when he lived. I saw an exhibit of his once in London, and I just love his work. So this sweater I really loved, and in my stash I had these colors from a packet that I had bought somewhere, and then I went into my my own stash of minis, sort of minis, and found these colors. So these are the colors I'm going to use for this sweater, and the gray in this, I'm using, this is my main color, is a yarn that I got. It's a merino from a small farm. It's, I think, hand spun from, I was at Wool & Folk in when I went up to Rhinebeck. So that's my main color, the gray, and then this is the beginning of this Paul Klee sweater. I'm right now trying to figure out there. This is by Midori Hiroshi, and if you've done any of her patterns, they're a little bit unusual, so I'm taking some time to really figure out that I'm doing this in the right way. The chart, it's stranded knitting, and she gives you several charts in different colorways for different sizes. So you're basically following a chart like this, and it's just stranded knitting of 2 colors on each row. So that got my mojo back, and I'm back in the groove, and I am going to finish this sweater, and I think I'm going to really enjoy it. I love knitting on the main color. I love this yarn. It's just beautiful. So I looked around the shop and I thought, well, what could someone do if they wanted to do it? And we have a beautiful yarn from Isair, and it's called Alpaca 2, and it's merino or it's wool and alpaca. They don't say whether it's merino, but anyway, it's quite soft and lovely to wear. And then we're out of these, and I'm going to order more. These are mini skeins from Manos del Uruguay in their yarn called Fino. So it's a fingering weight knit, but I am knitting it on a 4 and a 5. So you're not going to be on a 2 or a 3. They say 2 or 3, but I find I like this, and I got gauge on a 4 and a 5. So I'm quite happy with that. So we'll have more of these in the shop. So if you find yourself in a funk, go do something that might inspire you to do something else. Look around if you have a stash. Go to a yarn shop, come to my shop, go look online, look at Ravelry and see what people are doing, and find something that gives you joy. So don't slog along on something that becomes painful to you. Put it aside and pick it up later. That's another little hint that I have. If you get stuck on a pattern, go do something else for a couple hours. Go to bed, if it's nighttime, go to bed, and then look at it freshly in the morning. And you'd be amazed at how you get a different perspective and how you can usually resolve the question that you might have. So the next thing I wanted to talk about is gauge. And I know I've been doing this over and over and over again, but it's so important to knitting, and there's so many aspects of gauge that people don't think about. And some people don't want to bother to do a gauge. There are a lot of reasons why that's a bad idea. One, if you're making something to fit, you're taking a huge chance by not paying attention to gauge. You can't just get a needle and some yarn and start to knit. You have to, when you're reading a pattern, you have to look at the gauge and then look at the pattern. Look at the actual finished object, because I always tell people, you know, go look on your yarn label, although this is a bad example because they don't give gauge on that, Usayer. But most yarn labels give you a gauge, which is has a recommended needle size, and it has a recommended stitches per inch, which is what gauge is. So here it says to use a size 6, and you should get, to make this optimal, to make the yarn look lovely, you should get 22 stitches over 4 inches, which translates to 5.5 stitches per inch, dividing 22 by 4. The caveat that I want to talk about is that depending on what your finished fabric, what you want as a finished fabric, that could be radically different. You could, I saw somebody was here the other day, which reminds me, and I'm going to say it now because I will forget. Thank you to everybody who came to local yarn shop day. We had a ball. Thank you so much for supporting us. We really appreciate it. Anyway, somebody was doing a summer top, and it was in mohair, and it was called for a lace silk mohair, and it was knit on a size 10 needle. So you think, oh my gosh, that's crazy. Yes. The issue is that the designer wanted a big, loose, open stitch, and it was meant to be worn with a tank or something underneath it. So that's where you can get where gauge is different. And so you'd say, wait a minute, the yarn she recommended is on a size 3 needle, and they're telling me to use a 10. The reason they're doing that is they want you to have a big loose stitch. Now, if your pattern didn't call for that, and you're sitting there with this yarn that tells you to use a size 6, and you say, well, I don't really want to use a size 6, I'm going to use a size 8. Well, what happens is then, of course, the gauge changes and your stitches get bigger. Therefore, your garment gets bigger. So that's a problem, and it isn't going to fit you. Now, you could say to yourself, okay, I want bigger stitches. Well, then you would have to think about doing a smaller size in the pattern. So gauge can be really, really complicated. So it's worth thinking about. Look at what you want as a finished project. We've done other things where we've taken maybe a DK weight yarn to make a big, loose, lacy poncho to wear in the summer. And instead of using the size 6 or 7, we used a 10 or 11. Again, the same idea, to make a big, loose, open garment. The other thing about gauge, another customer was here the other day buying yarn for a sweater. And on the pattern, and it really is important to read when you're looking at measurements and the measurements they give you, or looking at the schematic, look at whether it's a finished measurement, which means that's the measurement you have when you finished the garment. So, and blocked it. And suppose this person was picking, her bust size was 39, so she was going to do, or was 38.5, she was going to do the 39. And it was a cardigan. I said, so then it's going to fit you with a 1/2 inch of positive ease, which means it's going to be super tight around your bust. Is that what you want for a cardigan? She said, oh no, I don't think I want that. And so I had her do one size up, which would have given her, 2 to 4 inches of positive ease. Now you've seen there are a lot of big patterns out there, or one size fits all patterns, where you have, 6 to 10, Joji Locatelli has her boxy sweater, had 10 inches of positive ease. So that's a lot. Negative ease is, I've said this before, is where something is going to be tightly fitting and stretch over you. Now there are some, if you make a ribbed something, because remember, if it's telling you you want this many stitches per inch in rib pattern, when you put that on, the ribbing is going to go like this. So you're going to have negative ease. I hope that's clear. But ribbing stretches. So very often, like if you're doing a tank or a T in ribbing, it's going to say that it is built in 4 inches of negative ease, which means when you put it on, it'll stretch out 4 inches. So therefore, if you are a 28-inch bust, this garment might measure 24 inches. And when you put it out, it stretches out to 28. So those are things to remember when you're looking at the schematics, when you're trying to find a size. Make sure you have read above and below that, usually it's a chart or something, or just a series of numbers. Make sure you read what those measurements are they're giving you. They might say, okay, this is going to measure, the medium size is going to measure 38 inches with 4 inches of positive ease. That means it's really for a bust size 34. I hope everybody kind of gets that. But if you have questions, do come and ask us. You can email us. We can, help you, or give us a call on the phone. It's so important, because what a waste of time to make something that isn't going to fit you. Another example is if you're doing a ribbed hat, the ribbing, if the measurement in the ribbing might be 18 inches, but your head is really 22 inches, well, that's going to stretch out. So you need to know what it is when it stretches out. So that's this week's speech on gauge. So I want to show you some new things we have in the shop. This is a shawl. It still needs to be blocked, but this is one that has caught my eye, called Venezia, and it's from Joji Locatelli, one of my favorite designers. And you can see it here where it's blocked out, and it's a beautiful size. The one I have is made in Cowgirl Blues yarns that we featured. We had a trunk show last weekend. This still needs to be blocked, and it's 1 skein of fingering weight. It's about 400 yards. And I wish I could remember the color. I think it's coral. But we have lots of beautiful samples, or beautiful colors. This is a solid.
Ruby grapefruit.
Ruby grapefruit. It could be, yes. And you could do it as Joji has done in a variegated. Anyway, I love this because it's a simple summer shawl. It's done in a wool, but once it's blocked out, the weave is quite open and perfect for the summer. So it's a gorgeous little shawl, not hard to do.
What's the lace pattern on that?
What's the lace pattern? I don't know.
What would you do?
It doesn't have a name, the lace in it, but it's a simple lace. So that's one. And the second one I had to show is a shawl by Lisa Ross called Soft Whisper. And there's one picture of it. You can see another picture here. And we did it on a size 5 needle. And this is it. It's nice and big. We used the I just blanked on the yarn. Oh, it's the cotton from Robin. Can you go grab it? It's over there.
Which cotton?
The cotton that's hanging with the fingering weight yarn. Keep going, keep going. I'm sorry. Anyway, this is it. And it's in cotton. And there's a variegated and then 3 semi-solids and a white. And so this is it. It's a generous, lovely, lovely shawl for the summer. And these are some of the colors. And this is the yarn. It's Araucania, and it's called Husco Cotton. And these are some of the colors. Then we have solids as well. These are the variegateds. It's a great summer yarn. And as I said, we did it on a size 5. So just because it's a fingering weight doesn't mean you have to be on a 3 or 4 or 2. Anyway, it's a beautiful yarn. So those are 2 new samples we have in the shop. And then we have a few new items. And these are some great shawl pins. These are from Likey, the people who make the needle sets. So I'm just going to show you some of the different shapes that they have. And these are great because you can just, it keeps your shawl in place all day long. There's another one. And here's some others. Here's a great cat for you cat lovers and for you sheep enthusiasts. And last, this is, I think I showed this, but it's in a different wood. So they're really lovely. And they're available online, so you can get those. And I wanted to show you, we had a cute little a notions bag that I just love. Comes from French Graffiti, is the name of the company, with a big, nice zipper. Put all your little notions. I can't live without a notions bag. So those are in the shop. And then we had, these are tea towels. And there's also one with a sheep on it, but this is a llama. So those are available. And then, if you need a little bit bigger project bag for like a sweater project, I thought this was a fun thing. And lastly, from Cowgirl Blues, she's made some drawstring project bags. So if you're looking for gifts for Mother's Day, these are some great ideas. A shawl pin would be great. And I think I have covered everything I wanted to cover today. So I hope you have a great week of knitting. Happy spring to everyone. I'm still waiting for it to warm up. My tulips came up about this far and haven't budged since that little warmth spree we had. So have a great week of knitting. If you're in a knitting funk, do something that will inspire you. Go to a museum, watch some podcasts, just go somewhere and look at yarn. So have a good one. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.